What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And today's video is following a pretty awesome card, actually, in Abu Dhabi, UFC Abu Dhabi from just this past Saturday. And today we are going to be talking about Tony Ferguson and what the UFC should do regarding Tony Ferguson. Okay. So hopefully, if you guys did have a chance to watch this fight, you might have seen Tony Ferguson in action. He fought Michael Chiesa, and I think the odds were pretty favorable before the fight, favoring Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa did pull it off with a submission. He had a rear naked choke that he sank in. Eventually, Tony tapped out to that. It was pretty securely sunk in. Now, at the end of the fight, Tony went up on the mic. Michael Chiesa had a very short speech. Tony went on the mic and talked about the fact that he was thinking about retiring. He had taken off his gloves. And what happened was that the crowd started going crazy because obviously everybody loves Tony Ferguson. He's such a fan favorite, arguably one of the most popular fighters in the history of the UFC. And people went bananas. And I think he was literally thinking he was going to retire. I believe that was the plan. And he listened to the crowd in the post-fight speech, and the crowd was going so crazy. And I just think he couldn't do it. He's like, wait a minute, if people love me this much and people want to keep wanting to see me fight, people continue to fly out to see me fight, which he also said in the post-fight presser, in the post-fight interview outside of the octagon, why should he give it up? And I can imagine that's got to be a pretty tricky situation. I can imagine if you're feeling that much love from this massive crowd halfway across the world in Abu Dhabi, anybody in that same situation would probably be rethinking that decision. Now, the tricky part about this whole situation is, why is the crowd cheering so vigorously for him? Why do they want him back? Why do we all want him back? It may just be because we love him, but it may not necessarily be because we believe he's got a good shot at winning a subsequent fight. That's the issue. And I think those two maybe get conflated, or were conflated in Tony's mind. And those massive cheers were just, people love him, but maybe not coming from the correct spot, meaning they're maybe not accurate predictors of what his fight performance would actually be. Okay. Nevertheless, he threw one glove down. He kept the other one, said just in case. Then later on, he went on to talk about how he doesn't want to retire. He also said he doesn't want to fight anywhere else other than the UFC. So now this puts the UFC in a really tricky spot. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's a really bad position. But I also have an idea on what they could do potentially. I'll probably need to talk to Justin about this tomorrow because I need to get his opinion. So here's why I think the UFC is in a tough spot. So first, let's talk about Tony's performance, and let's talk about his last 8 performances since he first lost to Justin Gaethje during the pandemic in 2020. And by the way, that was an incredible fight. If you haven't rewatched that fight in a while, I recommend you go back and rewatch it just so you can see, even if you're new to the sport and you never really saw Tony Ferguson fight, go back and watch his fights during his 12 fight win streak. Those were incredible. It's a completely different person, in my opinion. But you'll even see it in the Justin Gaethje fight. He still looked really good in that Justin Gaethje fight. And I will tell you what I think is now missing from Tony Ferguson's game, or what has really declined in the last several years that are very noticeable. The main thing is speed. I think his speed, and also his reaction time in terms of when he's seeing shots coming and being able to move out of the way. Even when Chiesa went in this last fight and was able to get him in that position, basically getting close and then slam him on the ground and then basically get the rear naked choke, his reaction time in terms of defense was just so slowed down. Now, if you go back and you watch the Justin Gaethje fight, a lot of these shots were connecting just because I think his speed was so much better. His reaction time, his response time was so much quicker, and he was still eating shots, which he has done historically in his career. But that to me is what is really apparent. And then, I mean, this is what every fighter says. I'm in my 40s. Like, I'm experiencing it now, right? You just start getting weird pains in different areas. Your speed starts slowing down. You might still have pretty good power in your shot still. And everybody says power is the last thing to go. But it's that speed factor that is really apparent. And I think as that is diminishing, as he continues to get older, that secret sauce that he used to possess just seems to be going away. I think that's the major issue that is causing Tony to just run into problem after problem. So now we come to the point where we're at, where he's on an 8-fight losing streak and he doesn't want to retire. And Torrin says, yeah, his speed was looking good against Chandler. Yeah, but it was looking good, I think, in moments. What's up, Western Mass Climber? Nothing, just want to do an impromptu an impromptu video on Tony Ferguson. I've just been thinking a lot about it in the last day since he lost yesterday, and we were all cheering for him. I mean, and that's basically it. But I've been thinking about what the UFC should do. And before I give my thoughts on what I think the UFC should do, let me preface it a little bit more. So again, I'm saying where I think Tony is now lacking. By the way, if you guys have seen the Tapology rankings recently, this is pretty crazy. And I haven't looked at it too in depth or studied these rankings too in depth, but if you look at how they lay out the rankings, okay, you look at all these records, all these guys, you've got legends like, hold on, where is Clay Guida? I know he's up. He's actually pretty high up. I'm not sure how they come up with these rankings per se. Oh, I know Clay Guida is in this top 30. But anyways, if you do look at these rankings, however they come up with them, what you can say, and this is kind of crazy, yet also it kind of makes sense. At the very, very bottom is where we find Tony Ferguson. And I guess you could say it's warranted because he's on an 8-fight losing streak, which I think is tied with what's his name? One of the most famous UFC fighters of all time. Oh my God. One of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. Hold on. Greatest lightweight of all time UFC. Yeah. Why am I blanking on his name? Not light. Whoa, geez. From Hawaii. Hold on. You guys know who I'm talking about. Why am I having such a hard time? BJ Penn. Yeah, I think BJ Penn had a yeah, there you go. Western Mass Climber. Thank you. Sorry. Anyways, he's now up there with this massive losing streak, but he doesn't want to retire. And it was pretty. I don't think this performance looked very good. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Tehran says he's looking slow at 170, 155, not so much. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think when we saw him last at 155, maybe he looked a little bit quicker, but I don't know. I'm starting to think that he's just slowed down. Because I don't think he put on that much size to come up to 170. I just don't think he really had to do that much of a weight cut. That's what it looked like to me. He didn't look that much bigger. So he doesn't want to retire. Now, obviously, the UFC can always cut him, which I don't think they are going to do. And I don't think they really should do because Tony is so beloved and he wants to fight. I think people would be in an uproar if Tony Ferguson were to be cut. I think Tony would be super pissed. I kind of think it would be a little bit unfair in a sense of just everything he's done for the company. When he did come back and take that fight against Justin Gaethje, he's done a lot of things for the business. I don't think they're going to cut him. Whatever people want to say about the UFC, I think at the end of the day, they are pretty loyal and they do take care of their guys. They never promise something and then pull the rug out from underneath fighters. So I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to stay loyal to him and try to work with him and try to have the relationship end, which is going to end at some point. It's going to end with every fighter at some point. When it does end, I imagine that it's going to end amicably and everybody's going to be happy. I think that's the outcome, obviously within reason. But I don't think they're just going to let him go and they're going to cut him per se. But I think they could come to an agreement on maybe one final fight. And the key is the matchup. Now, we're in a position where even if you go further down the rankings, like before he was fighting all the best guys, right? He was fighting Charles Oliveira. He was fighting Beneil Dariush, all these really, really amazing guys. Then we started to go down the rankings. He fought Paddy Pimblett. Again, now Paddy's in the top 15 too, by the way. Maybe he should have been back then. Who knows? Well, if he had the right fights. But he apparently was a lot better than people were saying he was. He lost to Bobby Green, who was in the top 15, right? Both of those guys he lost to. Now Michael Chiesa a little bit further down. So the question is, who can we match him up against? Because what do people want to see? We want to see him win. I think Tony wants to see himself win. I think the UFC wants to see him go out on a win. Okay. But it's a tricky spot now because I don't really know who to match him up with. And so and Tehran says Dana White left Tony. I think he does. I really think he does. So the question is, what's the matchup? How do we set this up so Tony can walk away feeling happy, feeling like he's got his fair shot, his fair due? And I think at this point on an 8-fight losing streak, like I said, BJ Penn is the only other guy that I can recollect who's had that much of a losing streak. And they have kept him around. They have done him a solid. Okay, so here's my idea. Ready? And maybe Clay Guida is not the right guy, but this is the guy that I'm thinking of, and this is the guy that I've heard other people mention. Clay Guida is also in a similar age group. Let me double check his age. I'm going to look him up right now. I just watched Clay Guida. Yeah, he's 42. Okay, so he's around the same age as Tony. I just watched Clay Guida's last fight, on the Kansas City card, I believe. And yeah, Tehran, I agree. Tehran says this fight has to be exciting, not a grappler. Well, I mean, what do you think of Clay Guida? Tell me if you think my idea is good. But you can do something like Clay Guida. And the reason why this could be dope is because Clay Guida was thinking about retiring in his last fight, but he didn't. So imagine if they match these guys up and maybe they have a discussion with them, maybe they talk to them if the UFC feels this way, and they write it Ferguson against Neil Magny. That doesn't, as I hear you talking about Neil Magny, that doesn't do it for me. But Tony Ferguson against Clay Guida is such a fan favorite. Maybe both of those guys will agree, hey, this can be our final fights. And that's an amazing final fight for both of them. They both come in. Tony, I think, will have a shot to win. I think if he loses, I think losing to a legend like Clay Guida, somebody who's been around for so long, I think that could be a great way to go out on his shield, and they can both take a bow together and think about the buildup for that fight. And especially if they stay ahead of time. This is Tony Ferguson's very last fight. What if they even gave him the main event of a UFC fight night or something like that? I don't know if they would do that. Two vets going up and battling it out. But yeah, let me know what you think. I see you're saying Ferguson versus Jim Miller. Yeah, that could also be a good one. I don't know. I feel like Clay Guida is a much, I don't know why. It just sounds like a much more interesting fight, a fight where they're just going to give it their all and bang it out and just go full throttle. And the crowd will just be so excited. I think people love Jim Miller. He's been around for a long time. I just feel like Clay Guida has a different energy, but I could see Jim Miller as well. But give him one last fight, bill it as his final finale, and that's it. And then as long as he agrees, you talk it out ahead of time, you work it out. This is your finale, and we go from there. I think that could be incredible. Anyways, those are my 2 cents. That's what Tony definitely has to be in a pay-per-view. Actually, Tehran says, actually, you're right. I think so. But it's just tricky because like if he's on a pay-per-view, then he can't headline it. So, which is fine. He may not have to headline it. Hold on one second, buddy. Sorry, my dog is crying. But anyways, that's what I want to talk about. Ferguson Guida's sick, right? You agree with me? Okay. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know in the live chat. I got to bounce because it is getting late and the little guy needs to go on a walk. But anyways, thank you guys so much for joining on this impromptu live stream. I really appreciate it. If anybody's new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please click that subscribe button. We're on a roll right now. We're getting up to the upper side of 300, getting close to 400, which is very exciting. So we'd love to have you along. Shows every Monday and Friday at 1:30 p.m. PST. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you tomorrow in our next episode with Justin. Take it easy.